Sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um episódio de Sideline Talks, seu programa sobre NFL do Brasil Fantasy Football. Este é um episódio muito especial, onde nós temos a presença de Robert Mays, o host do The Athletic Football Show, um dos melhores podcasts da NFL, pelo menos na minha opinião, o melhor. Uma conversa recheada de insights sobre como a NFL funciona, os pequenos detalhes que fazem toda a diferença no sucesso das franquias e também uma conversa muito bacana sobre alguns outros temas. Fiquem ligados e vamos nessa. Okay, so as you guys can see here, we have a very, very special guest, which is, I would say, a bucket list item person for me, and for João, of course. This guy and Nate, who we had a chat last semester, are two of the guys that we kind of have as godfathers of our podcast. We started Sideline Talks because of everything that you guys discussed and we discussed offline in parallel and say, yeah, these are some of the topics that I think are interesting. So, Mr. Robert Mays, thank you a lot for coming to our Sideline Talks to be able to talk to us. It's amazing.
Thank you very much. That's incredibly kind, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. João, my friend, and my co-host, and my partner, and the guy with the hot takes. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm especially good today talking to Robert. And I also want to thank you, man, for being here. Yeah, like we said tonight, it's like your guys are our friends. We feel like we know you. So sorry if we are a little too familiar today.
I always tell people that's one of the best compliments that I can get is when people come away from the show thinking that they know me and thinking that they can talk to me in a certain way. I think that is what we're trying to accomplish. And I've always said this, I don't really have like multiple speeds. Like who I am on the show is just who I am in real life. So if what you're getting from that is kind of the experience of getting to know me. So it's you're not wrong in feeling that way, but it does mean a lot when people say that because I think that's exactly what we're trying to get across.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna say I've been following you because this feels like a little bit of a stalker person, but I think the first time I got impacted by what you bring to the NFL, Robert, was when you wrote about Jordan Love when you were at the Ringer, I think. You wrote a piece about him, and funnily enough, he went for the Packers, and now you have to kind of watch him and be like, why can't I have this guy? But you gotta have Caleb, which is really nice with the Bears. But it's being kind of the Athletic Football Show, as I said, is being our go-to content place. It's amazing how you and Nate started, right? Because you guys started also messaging yourselves on Twitter, and you guys became friends, which is amazing. I will be very honest. I almost cried when you guys were crying when you guys had the last show. Nate is doing great with the 301 now. He's a fantastic person. You're doing great with Derek too. I love Derek's perspective on the Athletic Football Show. But yeah, you guys are basically kind of the blueprint, I would say, for what I feel is a successful and healthy approach to conversation on the NFL. You are positive. You have something nice to say about the people that are the people that are involved, and this is amazing, and this is what we try to bring to. So just a little bit of a thank you for doing the podcast that you do, to do the whole work that you guys do. It's amazing, and please extend this thank you also to Derek right now because he's also amazing in his own way.
I sure will. Again, that's incredibly kind, and it really does mean a lot, so thank you.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say before we start, which is a parallel conversation, I really, really want to talk to you, and I really need to know what are the places that I should go when I go to Japan next year in terms of restaurants and stuff like that. Because you are the guy, yeah.
I'll send you a list. Yes. There's plenty of places. I mean, we went to several very good restaurants, just like sit-down restaurants in the evening that I would recommend. I think I had a dozen bowls of ramen of different kinds at different places that I really enjoyed. Oh gosh, I mean, just so many things. We went to a tonkatsu pork place for lunch at one point that was just absolutely incredible. So yeah, I'll send you a list. I'm happy to do it. I have a running one that I've been shipping to people who are heading there.
Yeah, you have one for Chicago, which unfortunately I haven't been yet, but I already have that one downloaded. I was like, yeah, whenever I'm going to Chicago, I have to go to these places, at least to confirm or not that we have kind of the same taste in food. Because for teams, of course, we are completely different, right? So yeah. All right, last one on the Bears for now. Last one on the Packers for now. But
Yeah.
this episode is yes, John, please,
Yeah.
please.
I just want to tailgate on your question. Yeah. Robert, have you had any experience with Brazilian food?
Yeah, I've had Brazilian food like a Brazilian steakhouse before, but obviously
Yeah.
in America. So I feel like that's going to be a little bit different than getting the real experience. So we're actually in the process of putting together a podcast episode on Brazil right now, and talking to Brazilian journalists, people that have done reporting about the NFL's expansion into Brazil. I keep saying this, my college, he wasn't my college roommate. My roommate from my first internship in journalism in Boston is actually the Brazilian bureau chief for the New York Times now. So he and I talked a couple weeks ago for the show, and we were just discussing Brazil and his time there. And every conversation I have with somebody who either lives there or is familiar with the culture and the food, it makes me want to go. So I'm hoping if there's another Brazil game there next year that I can kind of wiggle my way there and convince my bosses to pay for a flight so I can just eat at Brazilian steakhouses for like 6 straight days.
Yeah,
And let
I'll
me tell
just
you
say one
something.
thing.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Go, John. Go, John.
The steakhouse are not even our best food.
You
Exactly.
tell me where to go and I will go there.
We'll give you a list, but I will say you have to. Even though I am from São Paulo, and where São Paulo is where the games are most likely going to happen, and we have amazing restaurants everywhere. It is known as the cuisine capital of Brazil because you have so many different options. But you have to go to Minas Gerais, which is the state that João lives in, and man, that
It's the
it's
best
like
food.
local food. Yeah, it's just simply amazing. Yeah, yeah.
That's my
But
favorite. Traveling to eat has become really my favorite way to spend time at this point. So if I can somehow fold that into my work over the next year, that's definitely the ideal plan.
yeah, I know we're gonna raise some eyebrows here by saying Minas Gerais has the best food because the people from the Northeast they're gonna like, try to claim that spot and they have amazing food in their own. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a continental country, so you have like all of these options, but I would say the Minas Gerais food is the best one.
I've never
All
been
right,
to South America,
yeah,
and I'm very, it's on my list. At some point in the next year or so, I will make a trip down there, whether it's to Brazil at some point, which I'd love to get to. I'd love to spend some time in Argentina, a bunch of different places. So that is on my to-do list here over the next year or two, is to finally get down to that area of the country or that area of the
awesome.
world.
Whenever you need to know something, just ping us and we'll share everything that we
I
we have on
appreciate
you.
that.
And if you ever come to Portugal, which is where I live right now, you can just let me know and we can grab beers and I can take you to the best seafood that is out here.
Yeah.
It's funny. We were planning a trip maybe to go to Spain and Portugal, and my wife and we just landed on we just want to go to too many places in Spain. So I think we're just going to spend 2 weeks in Spain, and then we'll hit the Portugal trip at a different time when we get back to Europe because we would love to go to both.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, enough of the food because otherwise this is going to become like a Food Network show. Um, I would like to talk to you both, which is something that it has become a little bit of the identity of Sideline Talks, which is our show right now, right? We talk a lot about different parts of the game that are or are not relevant for fantasy football. We don't talk a lot about fantasy football first because we suck. Me and John were very bad at having teams on. Most of our teams are now out of contention. They are like on toilet bowls and stuff like that. But we really love to talk about the finer intricacies of the game. So different things about the game. João, as everybody knows, it's a coach, so he has kind of this more technical eye to it. I am the feelings guy. I like to watch like numbers afterwards and see like success rates on stuff, EPA per play, things like that. But I'm more of the vibe guys and say, oh, this guy is actually playing good. So I'm kind of the guy who looks at things. But I'd like to know, Robert, because you have a weekly show where you kind of do the recap, right, of every single game that has happened. You and Derek, you discuss plays, moments, things that are interesting there. So how do you approach this? How do you look and how do you watch games on any given Sunday? And what are usually the things that you look for?
So I think it's a few different processes, and I can lay out what those would look like. So what the way I'm watching a set of games on Sunday is different than the way I would watch like Monday Night Football last night, because there was only one game going on. It's obviously much easier to focus on every little detail. So like let's say for a playoff game, for example, right? So the playoff game, when we're doing the recap, we're only watching one game at a time. I've come to realize that it's easier for me to watch those at home, even though it is tempting sometimes to go to them because I can't go to
Mm-hmm.
games during the regular season. But when I'm at home, what I do is I'll have one game on one TV. I'll have the game on two TVs, and I'll have it on one screen, and then I'll have it like 20 seconds delayed on the second screen. So I can just watch the play a second time as they're huddling and as people are waiting in that kind of like 10 to 15 seconds. So that's obviously very different than watching 10 games at once.
Mm-hmm.
During the early slate of games on Sundays, when there's 6 games going at a time, 8 games, 10 games, whatever, I have 3 TVs that I can split into 6 games. So typically I'll have 6 games going at any given time. You're watching those just slightly differently just because there's so much happening. So the way that our Sunday show works is that, we're paying attention to the games. There's obviously better ones that I'm paying a little bit more attention to.
Of
So
course.
like, for example, in the early slate last Sunday, the Vikings are playing the Cardinals and the Bengals are playing the Steelers. Those games have their own TVs. And so I'm watching a huge majority of the Cardinals Vikings game. The other games, you're just trying to pick up, what's happening, little moments, just making sure that you're kind of taking in as much as you can. And then over the course of the day, when the second slate of games ends at about 6:30 p.m. Central Time where I live, me and Derek will have a conversation, and me and Nate used to do the same thing. Okay, which games do we want to talk about? What were the most important moments of today? And there are times where, okay, I understand what happened in that game. I was paying attention, but I didn't watch that game that closely. And so what I'll do from 6:30 until 10:30 when we record the show is I will go back and rewatch the games during the Sunday night game in order to
Okay.
just make sure that I have a really good handle on what's happening. So it's a different process for when I'm watching something that is my sole focus and when I'm watching something where there's, 6, 8 games going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take notes?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, the whole time. So, and then for that's for every game. So at the beginning of every Sunday, I'll literally split a document up into, here are the 8 games, and I'll type them out, and I'll have bullet points under each one, and then just as the game goes, I'll try to pick up as much as I possibly can. The hope is that there's some games where I don't have to rewatch it. The Eagles Ravens game last week, I watched every single play of that game multiple different times. I was kind of watching the other games out of the corner of my eye, but I knew going in, we're going to talk about the Eagles Ravens game. Like that's something I'm going to have to pay attention to as I move through the day here.
Mm-hmm. So you do kind of round up some of the games that you feel are going to be the most interesting one, or they are NFL relevant, so to speak, right? Because, for example, Ravens Eagles game is always going to be a very important battle because it's two teams that are contenders, are going to be fighting for a playoff spot or most likely like a Super Bowl spot in it. So you would be circling those ones as kind of more important to watch, right?
Yeah. Hey, if you look at the layout of our Sunday show, we have kind of like an A block, a B block, and a C block. So the A block is
Mm-hmm.
just the lead of the show. That's the thing that we feel like is the biggest story of the day.
Yes.
And Eagles Ravens was a 3 p.m. game, essentially nationally televised. Everyone watched it. It was a very good game. We're going to lead with that game. And then we have a set of categories after that that are kind of like the step down. What really jumped out to you today that maybe is a step down from the lead show? And last week, that was the way the Steelers offense played. And then we kind of shoehorned a conversation about the NFC West into that category. And
Mm-hmm.
then on the flip side of that, it's like, okay, what bad stuff happened today? And then at the end of the show, we'll do 3, 4, 5 little observations from games we maybe didn't watch as closely, but there was a notable outcome, there was a notable play, etc. So the show kind of goes in order of importance. I think that's kind of how we typically lay it out.
Yeah, I can see that because I remember last year, this year not too much, but last year when you and Nate would do the recap, and sometimes, of course, because you're circling like the most important ones are the ones that had something interesting to happen, right? I was always like, when are they going to talk about the Packers? What they're going to say about Love? Because it was the whole thing of like Love coming into his first year and the perception of if is he ready? Is he a rookie? Is he a franchise QB? Is he the heir to Aaron Rodgers? I was always like are they gonna say something about Jordan Love? I was gonna, as a supporter, right? So I will be expecting that. But it's interesting to see how you approach that. And what do you think is the value? Of course, because of the podcast itself, but what is the value of trying to look into those different things? That, is that giving you something different if you were just enjoying the game and watching just one game, or you prefer to watch one game rather than watch like six or seven at the same time?
Oh, I very much prefer just to watch one game at a time. It's just so much easier to pay attention. It's so much easier to understand what's happening. That Sunday experience is awesome. I love watching football for my job. It's very fun, but there's just so much to pay attention to, and you feel like you're not necessarily seeing everything. So my favorite shows that we do, my favorite time of the year for the podcast is the playoffs because
Hmm.
there's only one game on at a time. It narrows your focus. Obviously, they're the most important games of the year, but I absolutely prefer just being able to watch one game and have a real sense of everything that happened. When we're talking about, I don't know why this game is sticking out in my head, but Dolphins Chiefs from last year, that super, super cold playoff game.
Hmm.
I can watch that whole game. I don't have to worry about, oh, did I miss this moment? Do I really have a sense of what happened when we're talking about it? I know I watched every play twice because of how much focus you can spend on it. So that's definitely my preferred way to take the sport and to talk about it because I just feel like there's nothing that's hiding in the cracks that I can't really see.
Nice. Yeah. Have you ever tried this approach that you have like during regular season with red zone? Because red zone is basically like you just see the main plays, right, or the big plays that you have on every single game. And it feels to me that what you have is like red zone on steroids. That you have like three screens with six games, and you're like always doing like this.
I I typically there was a time when I only had the three TVs when I would split the bottom TV into four games. This is before YouTube TV was doing Sunday Ticket.
Hmm.
So I would split the bottom TV into four games, and then I would have Red Zone on the top TV, and I'd have the Bears typically on the other TV. And I can, now that the YouTube TV is just a little bit different, I feel like I've always rather just watch six games that are happening at a time than spend one game on red zone. For whatever reason this year, it seems like there have been less slates with like 10ish games in the early morning. That's the only time where I'm like, oh man, let's just put red zone on the third TV because
Hmm.
if I have three games I can't watch, then that's different than having one game I can't watch. I'm trying to think of what the game was this week. I think it might have been Colts Patriots, where it was just like, I don't have a TV for this. And so just
Hmm.
knowing that going in, and you try to pay attention to some of it, but you're always going to have to make concessions. And I think for me,
Of
I
course.
would rather be able to make sure that I'm seeing all of a game rather than not wasting, but using one of the TVs on red zone. That's just kind of a decision I've made this year, especially.
Yeah, because that way you got more control, right? Because red zone,
Yeah.
they decide what you're watching.
Yeah, and I think with Red Zone, if that's the only thing you have, or it's a second TV, I think that makes total sense. But the fact that I can watch those six games at a time, and if I want to, I can kind of toggle back and forth. And this is getting
Yeah.
very in the weeds, but part of the reason that the games are separated the way that they are, even though I have Sunday Ticket now, you can only split the Sunday Ticket like multi-view into certain subsect of games based
Hmm.
on which games are on your local cable feed. So
Ah,
I
okay.
can't put the game that's on my local cable feed into a multi-view with other games. So there are times like Steelers Bengals last week is a perfect example. That game was on CBS, and so I couldn't put that into a combination with three other games that had to have the top left TV. So it's just a little puzzle that you have to put together every day, and just there are drawbacks and concessions that you have to make when you're doing it. But at this point, it's second nature. I've been doing it for long enough where it's just I kind of finish my workout at like 11:30 and go over and just sweatily turn the TVs on. And I'm like, all right, how am I going to get this where I wanted to do it? And it's the same process every week now. And I'm very used to it at this point.
Yeah, as you said, it's your work at the end of the day, right? It's fun, it's nice, it's like a pleasure to be working to do this, but it's your work at the end of the day. So you have to have a process in the back of it, right?
Yeah, that's how I feel. I'm having a good time every week until like 9 p.m. and realizing how much stuff I have to get organized and the fact that we have to do a show in 90 minutes. And it always feels like a little bit of a sprint to get to that moment. And I just feel, you want to do a good job and you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. And so every week there's definitely a moment where I'm like, I'm not ready for this. This is going to be an absolute disaster. And somehow at the end of the day, we always put it out, and I still
Yes.
have the job. So I guess that's what's important.
Yeah, you guys have been doing a great work. Don't worry about that. It's very honest. It's very true, and I think that's why it's so respected. What you guys have done. Do you watch every single Bears game? Do you always have
Yes.
kind of this as a supporter? So you're always looking at a Bears game, right?
Yes. Whenever the Bears are on in the early slate, they have their own TV. I don't know. I couldn't do it any differently. Like, I don't know how I would. The thought of them being, there are times, right? There are absolutely times where it's a little bit easier to pay less attention. It's the back half of the season. By the end of last year, it's like, all right,
Hmm.
we all know how this is going to end. This is it. You hope they get the number one pick, but I'm pretty confident that they're going to move on from Fields, etc. And even the last year of the Nagy era was even easier to do than that. So, but this year especially, I mean, I don't have kids, but I assume that my experience watching Caleb Williams is like adjacent to being a young parent, where like I'm just worried about everything he's doing. Just like, is he okay? Is he doing all right? And so the fact that you wouldn't like stop paying attention to your child, you wouldn't like turn off
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the little transmitter by the bed or the camera or whatever. You keep that on at all times. You have to keep tabs on what's happening, and that's kind of how it's been this year. So yes, they always have a TV in the early slate.
We know exactly how you feel because we have Andres. I told you, it's our friend. He's a Bears supporter, and Caleb has become kind of the Bears supporters' child, right? Where everybody's like, is he working well? Is he doing the things that we expect the number one overall pick to do? We had discussion, me and João. We had Drake May as kind of the best quarterback at this class. So it's always like, is he doing better than Caleb than Drake? Are we sure we chose correctly? Is he not going to be like the next Mitch Trubisky or the next Justin Fields and stuff like that? So yeah, I know how you feel. And it's nice. It's also nice. I think he's very honest to be this guy who is a Bears fan and who shows that is a Bears fan and not necessarily hiding. I'm not saying hiding necessarily, but some reporters or some people they tend to have a team, but not necessarily be that forthcoming with what the team that they support and how crazy they are as fans. And sometimes I can feel your pain when you're talking about the Bears.
I think that I understand for the most part. My path in this world and in this business is unique in the sense that I started working. My first job was working for Bill Simmons when I was 23. I worked for Growlin starting in 2011, and obviously Bill is famously a Boston sports fan, and that was part of his entire persona. When he
Hmm.
started as a sports writer, and so I worked at a place early in my career and for the first 10 years of my career where you could be a fan. And there are a lot of places where that's not possible. And that's just not part of, how the ethical guidelines for covering the sport in a journalistic way work. And I respect those and I completely
Of
understand
course.
why those rules are in place. I just happen to be in a slightly less traditional environment. And so I was allowed to kind of maintain my fandom. And when I moved over to the Athletic, it's obviously a little bit more complicated, but because most of my work is centered on the podcast side of it, and I think that we've gotten to a place in the industry and just in sports media in general where there are less rigid rules about that sort of stuff, where I think that people understand that you come into things with your own tastes and your own biases and your own history, and being a fan doesn't necessarily make you less able to talk about the sport in an unbiased way. I think anybody who hears me talk about the Bears would never accuse me of talking about them in any sort of favorable way. If anything, I think I'm harsher and a little bit less forgiving than a lot of other people would be because of my history with them.
Yeah, we try on our podcast to be at least the same thing as cognizant of who we are, but trying to be I would say fair-minded or fair to everything that happens. Me as a Packers fan, but I would always make fun like the Dontavian Weeks is the best wide receiver to have ever lived, and I still can't quit on him and stuff like that. But yeah, it's I like the approach. I think it's honest as long as you said, you're not biasing the information that you're passing through, right? You're at least honest into saying, hey, this is my perspective. It might be a kind of a fan-made perspective. My expectation is this, and that. But yeah, but it has space for also people who I don't know, say shouldn't, but have become less fans because of the job and the role that they have, right?
I think that's inevitable for a lot of people, and I completely understand that. And I think that there are elements of, my experience that I could see that potentially happening if things were slightly different. And I've talked about this before, but my experience growing up and watching the Bears with my father was very formative for me. And
Hmm.
my father died when I was 21, and I think that there's a part of me that still holds on to my fandom and just cares about the team so much, just because of that. Just because it for how in whatever small way is, it's like a little connection that I still have with him. So I
Yes.
think that's part of the reason that I've maintained it in the way that I have. As we get older, your tastes change and the things that you're invested in change. And I think that a lot of people, as they get older, sports fandom kind of becomes a little bit less intense than it would otherwise, just because your attention and your energy and your focus gets pulled in a million different directions. But because I get to focus on football for work, and because I think I've maintained that fandom because of my personal history, I think I've been able to kind of keep it going in a way somebody in my position might not.
Yeah, that's super cool. That's super cool. Talking about the what you watch and the way you watch. So what are the things when you're watching a game or games that you like to focus on? Of course, we have quarterback plays, which is like the thing that gets the most headlines or big plays or stuff like that. But is there something that you really like to watch that is different? Like, for example, offensive line combinations or the way the defensive lines are playing or the linebacker position or whatever. So is there something that usually gets your interest or beyond just this, I need to report this, and that, or I need to have this prepared for the show?
It's a good question, and I was thinking about what my answer to this would be when we were discussing it earlier. And I think that the bucket that I would put it in is I like paying attention to what teams are trying to accomplish with certain plays, right? So when you watch the structure of a play, what is the intent of that play, both offensively and defensively? And there's a bunch of different examples of this. I'll point to a couple that I'm thinking about right now, just from the Eagles Ravens game, because those
Mm-hmm.
are fresh in my mind. There was a drive at one point where the Eagles used like a quick motion with Britton Covey and sent him into the flat to the right side. And then they ran under center play action to the left, and they hit like a crossing route to AJ Brown coming back across. And so you think about the individual components of that play. Why are you doing all of these three things together? Right. So by running the play action, you're hoping that the linebackers step up. By sending Covey into the flat, you're getting horizontal stretch that way to pull the defense to the sideline. And then the crossers coming back behind it. That to me, that's why I love football, is trying to figure out how all of the component parts are trying to fit together. When you're watching, a great example of this is the Packers game against the Texans, right? So the Packers are in all of these looks where they have 7 guys up on the line of scrimmage, and they're trying to play with the way that the Texans are trying to pass protect. So you're watching that, and you see 7 guys lined up on the line, and 2 drop out or 3 drop out. Well, why? Which 3? Why? What are they
Mm-hmm.
trying to do by the looks that they're giving? When you watch a team run a simulated pressure, which is a blitz or a look where you'll bring 4 guys, but it's not the 4 that are lined up as defensive linemen. Well, what are you trying to do? How are you trying to affect the team that way? When you're pulling a lineman, what is the blocking scheme supposed to look like? So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do as I watch a game, is I'm trying to figure out what is the intention of what the coaches and the offense and defense are trying to accomplish by the designs that they're using, by the game plans they're implementing. And that's for the most part what I'm trying to pay attention to when I watch a game.
John, what about you? What is usually what you look at as a coach? You have this clinical eye, I would say, but what are the things that you look for or that you like to watch when you're looking when you're watching a game?
Yeah, it's basically the same as what Robert said. That's what also attracted me to the game. It's the moving pieces and the logic behind it. the strategy, the tactic. Uh, so I find it really hard to get it all live on the live games.
It's impossible.
So yeah.
Yes, yes, true, true.
So that's why most Tuesdays when you ask me something, I say, yeah, sorry, I haven't watched enough. Because it takes a lot of time to digest everything, to study that, to dissect it.
Hmm.
So during the games, what I focus the most is quarterback play. It's what I feel that I can get more out of just watching live. Maybe because I haven't watched for my entire life, I don't have a trained eye to understand things as they are occurring.
Well, you have a better eye than I do. What I like to watch when I'm watching games is it's interesting because, of course, you always watch the play itself and you want to see the play succeed or the play fails, and then like kind of kudos or congratulations to the defense. But I love to watch the guys who are not involved in the play, and I think that's what I love the most about the game is how it takes 11 people to make a play work. Even if we point at the quarterback as being kind of out of this world, or maybe you have like a Justin Jefferson of the world that is fantastic on his own, a Saquon Barkley into 2024 doing what he's doing. But I love to see players who are playing but not with the ball, right? If that's the thing, because everybody needs to do their assignment correctly. So I can point more for the Packers, but for example, I love Tucker Craft because he's always in the play. He's the one helping Josh Jacobs get 2 more yards because he's pulling someone to the side, or he is pushing the line to one side or the other. He is opening up and he's taking a linebacker or a safety sometimes with him. So I love to see those finer things that are usually not something that is happening on the game. In this game, like the Ravens Eagles games, there was a play where Zay Flowers he opens up and he start running, and then you see Quinion Mitchell not going for him but staying around him, and you see like he's ready to get this ball. He's there to just prevent Zay Flowers from getting the ball, and you see Lamar he looks like twice to that side because he wants to throw the ball there. He's like, I know I'm not gonna get this. I know this guy's gonna pick the ball if I try it. So I love to see those small things. And usually what I pay attention the most is the position that I like the most also, which is running back. I love the position. I love the concepts that they have, and it's super nice to see how a running back can be successful, especially because it feels to me, I don't know if you guys agree or not, but in 2024 there seems to be kind of a renaissance of the position itself. I don't know what's happening exactly. I don't have like as I said, the trained eye to go through all of the concepts. But it feels to me people are now understanding how to better use running backs or using it in a different way. And I have Josh Jacobs having this career year that he has because of the design that Matt LaFleur has. You have Derrick Henry also still going and destroying people, and Saquon doing what he's doing on the Eagles.
Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit recently, where I think that the analogy that I've started using is running backs. A really good running back is almost like gasoline or lighter fluid, thrown on a fire. And if you look at the Eagles, if you look at the Ravens, even the Packers to an extent, these are teams that were already good at running the ball. The infrastructure for their ability to run the ball already exists. The Eagles and the Ravens for the last 2 seasons, even without these guys, were the most efficient rushing teams in football. So you already have the ecosystem, the infrastructure, whatever term you want to use, set up. And so the way that I've described it is you already started a fire, right? Now you're just sitting there throwing gasoline on the fire by adding a guy like Saquon, by adding a guy like Derrick Henry. And I think that the comparison works in a way because it's evocative, and that's what it feels like. Like when you watch Saquon with that offensive line, it looks like a bonfire. Like it is a very combustible situation. And so that's kind of what I've gone to over the course of this year, is that I think we've realized the value of a really good running back when you put him into a really good situation, and how much more a player like Saquon or Derrick Henry can get from that setup than somebody like a Gus Edwards or a DeAndre Swift, who are capable backs but are not the caliber of player that we're talking about with those guys.
Yeah, but do you think that maybe if they had the opportunity to be well, not Seth Rollins because he was there, but playing for the Ravens, 2024 Ravens, right? Or the 2024 Eagles, they would be close to the same success, or is it also a combination of the talent that these guys have with the way that the team is playing or is constructed?
I think that I think that you see a different outcome with a guy like Saquon Barkley, and it's so difficult, as somebody who I think sort of understands what you are trying to accomplish as a running back, but by no means am I like a running back scout or anything like that. When you
Mm-hmm.
watch Saquon, the vision, the just the you'll see things unfold, and he's making cutbacks and just seeing holes that I think other running backs wouldn't necessarily see. So you can easily point to this idea, and I've tried to figure out how to untangle all of this myself. You can easily point to the Eagles' offensive line is fantastic, right? They're one of the
Mm-hmm.
best offensive lines in the NFL. So they're obviously propelling Saquon to some of the success. But you'll watch some plays where he'll be taking it front side and he'll duck all the way backside because he saw like a little sliver of daylight. And you think, well, that's making the offensive line look better. So it's all very difficult to untangle, right? It's all a
Mm-hmm.
combination. It all works in context with everything else. And I just think that my main takeaway from this is that we have learned what it means to drop really good running backs into really good situations and how different those guys can look when the circumstances around them change.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with this. Yeah, running back is the thing that I love. I love from Eddie Lacy was my guy, and I was like, okay, this is the position that I want to watch for the rest of my life. Yeah, Mr. Bacon, as he would be called in Brazil. He has this very weird nickname just because there was a guy when he was playing for the Packers. He was always like this bulky running back, right? There was a
Sure.
Brazilian narrator. Yeah,
Yeah,
there was a
it's a way
Brazilian
of saying
narrator.
it.
Yeah, and then he would run like a 40 yards or something like that. He would break like this long runs, and then the Brazilian narrator would say like bacon, lasagna, because he was like oh this fatty, right? But it was so much fun. And then we just gave like the nickname of Eddie Lacy the Bacon. So yeah, that's the guy for us.
Very fond memories watching Eddie Lacy, even if he was trampling all over my team. But I enjoyed those Packers teams. They were fun to watch, even if it often came at my expense.
Yeah, you had Jay Cutler at the time, and you can't wish
Yeah.
for too much. I know, I know, I know. But you had Brandon Marshall, which I loved. Alshon Jeffrey, which was also awesome, and Matt Forte. You had Matt Forte. Come on, you had a running
Matt
back for us.
Forte was a phenomenal football player.
Yes.
That we had that one 2013 Bears year that was very enjoyable. I'll remember that fondly.
Yeah, the Sam Bradford year with the Rams. Oh my good God. Yes. Okay, let's not go too much on the memory lane here. But I would like to ask you, okay, I think we can use this as a springboard for the next question that I have, which is we talk a lot about like we as people we talk about the game itself and the players and how they influence outcomes and how Drake May is going to be a superstar and he's going to lift the Patriots back after Brady. We had expectations on Caleb to become this guy who is also going to lift the Bears to become a contender year over year. But I'd like to talk more about on the other side of things, which is the business side, right? And just to see your perspective on this, Robert. No final answers, I think, but like, what do you see the influence on this business side to the games themselves? Because it feels to us that you have those perpetual contenders, so to speak. So every single year you have like the Chiefs, who's always is always going to be a team that you're going to look and say this is a Super Bowl bound team. You have the Bills, even though this year was supposed to be a retooling year for them. They also someone that you will see like that. The Steelers. Forget about who's the quarterback. Like I can be the quarterback for that team, and Mike Tomlin is gonna make that work. And but the whole Art Rooney setup seems to work for them, right? So, what do you see as important on this business side, and how do you think this influences how the team actually plays on any given Sunday?
I think stability and alignment are probably the words that I would use. Are the sides of your organization, coaching and personnel, is there alignment? Is there a shared vision from everybody involved in terms of what you're trying to build and who you're trying to be? You look at the teams that have been real kind of paragons of that sort of stability and success. The Steelers, there's stability because Mike Tomlin is there, right? And even with the way that they've handled their front office, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Ravens, which you can also throw into this bucket, right? So the Ravens have one head coach, Steelers have one head coach for the last, Mike Tomlin's been there for 20 years now, right? I think it
20
was
something, yeah.
2006, 2007. And so they move on from Kevin Colbert, who was their general manager previously, and then they moved on to Omar Khan, who had worked for the team. Same in Baltimore, where you have Ozzie Newsome working with Harbaugh, and then they hire Eric DaCosta, who had been in that front office forever. There's a way to be a Steeler. There's a way to be a Raven. And the reason that exists is because there's been so much stability in those organizations for so long. And I think the Ravens specifically deserve a lot of credit for evolving as part of that process. That there's been a baseline level of stability and there's been an expectation and a culture, which is kind of a hard word to define, but I think it really does have a huge impact on what your team is. Those expectations are set and you have those standards. But in John Harbaugh's case, he's swapped out defensive systems, offensive systems. There's a proactive feel to that organization where they're always trying to make sure that they're exhausting every single opportunity to be as good as they can be. I think the Eagles are like that, where there's stability because Howie Roseman's been there for so long. And there's been, some turnover with the coaching staff, obviously, but you still at the end of the day have a vision for the organization that has been stable and consistent since Howie took back over the team in 2016, I think it was, when Doug Peterson got hired. And so just making sure that you're having people at the top of your organization that have a consistent vision and a proactive feel for how you're going to make sure that you're improving, you're keeping up with everybody, etc. The best example I would say of a team that has kind of come new on the scene in this entire conversation, but I think fits a lot of these discussion points, would be the Lions, right? So the Lions come in with Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. They have a shared vision for what a Lion is. What type of players are we going to have? How are we going to play? Just those sorts of standards and those sorts of benchmarks for what you want to be as a team and an organization. And I think that when there are teams that fit that bill, when there are teams that align like that, you feel it when you watch them. And I think that the gap between those teams and the rest of the teams that we watch, you can understand that in the moment.
And do you think this is because it feels it's easier said than done, right?
Of course.
Yeah, but why do you think this happens? So why is it? Let's use the Lions as a blueprint, right? So as the idea of this, everything kind of connects now. And I remember when they had like Dan Campbell, I looked at what he said, like the kneecapping, eating, biting, whatever it was. But this whole shared alignment, right, that they had, I said this team is actually going to be competitive. I'm not sure if they're going to be Super Bowl contenders or Super Bowl winners at that time, but I said, okay, these guys, at least they have a plan. They have something that is there. But it's similar to when I think the first or second presser with the Cardinals, when they have this new regime. I said, okay, these guys are interesting. And last year we saw like a terrible defense, at least trying, as you guys would say, the funky looks, the different things. Nate was in love with the whole defense, even though they didn't have the players. But is it enough? Is it something that they can have and it's there? And why is it so difficult to find? Because why don't other teams do that? The Jaguars, for example, who is, I think, is perpetually disorganized. I'm not gonna say a joke, but disorganized. The Falcons, especially after 2016, that they become like this. I can take the Falcons seriously. Like even though they have Bijani, they don't have Drake London. These guys I love, but I can't take that team seriously. It seems very difficult to have. So why is it so difficult to have these things if you have so many good examples and blueprints around the league for that type of success?
It's a great question. I think that agendas, egos, self-preservation, all of these things get in the way. These decisions are never made in a vacuum. The Jaguars are a perfect example. So the Jaguars, for whatever reason, after firing Urban Meyer, they keep Trent Baalke as their general manager and they bring in Doug Peterson. And now you have this marriage between two guys who Trent Baalke was there, but does it really make sense for them to be paired together? Is there a reason Trent Baalke has that job? There's really no organizational alignment or vision. I don't think that there was ever. I assume that Trent Baalke is going to get fired at the end of this year. I don't know that to be the case. He seems to be able to survive a nuclear blast at this point. I don't think that there is a lot of shared vision between the personnel side of that team and the coaching staff. I think
Mm-hmm.
that the personnel side picks the players, and then the coaching staff is tasked with deploying those players. That's a mistake, right? That's not a shared vision for an organization. And so I think that trying to do everything you can to make sure that you're making choices in lockstep with one another because you understand together what you're trying to accomplish. I think that is the goal. And I think that teams get in their own way when trying to arrive at that point way more often than they probably should.
Yeah, it's a good point. As I said, I don't have an answer for this. I really can't pinpoint specifically one, but it's interesting that you know how things should work, and especially the NFL where you have like owners, right? You have like people who owns a team. It's not like the Packers, which is a kind of local based. You have kind of a president or whatever, but you have an owner, and the owner not necessarily trying to repeat or copy what the other successful owners are doing. It's pretty interesting, I think.
Robert, let me ask you a question that just occurred to me. Do you think we should have more head coach candidates refusing jobs like Ben Johnson did last year? Because from what you just told me, I think sometimes head coaches they just accept working with a general manager that doesn't suit them. Yeah, there was a high school coach in California that used to go to job interviews dressed casually. And one day, I forgot the position that was hiring him. So come on, man, this is how you dress to a job interview. And he said, no, you got it all wrong. I'm interviewing you to see if I want to take this job.
I think that it's really, really hard when you're making, let's say, $1.5 to $2 million a year. It's a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money. But what if someone come and said, I'll give you 12 million? Now you go from a nice life to like true wealth. That is a level of money and a change in lifestyle that is very, very difficult to turn down on a practical level. You don't know when your opportunity is going to come again. A guy like, let's say Bobby Slowick this year, right? Bobby Slowick last year was one of the hottest head coaching candidates
Yes.
after what he did with CJ Stroud. Now I think their offense is struggling, and you missed your window. There are only 32 of these jobs, and these guys have very big egos. And the amount of money involved here is astronomical. So turning down that opportunity when you're given one of those, that's really difficult to do unless you are steadfast in knowing I'm going to get another one. And Ben Johnson is in such a unique situation where he knows and they know that this is going to be a stable organization that's going to continue to have success. His job, his opportunity will come, and he can be picky as a result of that. But the league is so fickle and it's so hard to be consistently successful that if you're given the opportunity to take one of these jobs, it's hard to turn down. I was talking to an offensive coordinator a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about a job that I think has some potential complications to it. And I was like, would you take that job? And he says, absolutely, I would. It's like, of course I would. It's being a head coach in the NFL. You only get so many shots at that. And there are other guys I've talked to that, told me after the fact, yeah, I wouldn't have taken it even if they had offered it to me. But I think that those are exceptions, and I think that we underrate how quickly things can change too. Arizona is the job that I think, there are people that I know around Jonathan Gannon that they thought he was crazy for taking that job. Why would you take that job? It's a losing battle. Like, you're going to a place where you're almost destined to fail. And I think in a previous iteration of that team, that was probably true, just based on the setup between the ownership and the front office. But when Monty Ossenfort came in, that was the first time in 20-ish years that the Cardinals had kind of changed over what their front office processes looked like. They had people that they had hired, Rod Graves, Steve Keim, that were members of the organization for decades. And that's all they had ever known was working for the Cardinals. Monty comes in from the outside. He changes the way that things are operating there. And now things feel a little bit different. So it doesn't, and the Lions are another really good example. It doesn't take that much change and to find the right leadership to give that organization a different feel and potentially put it on a different path towards success.
Yeah, we keep forgetting sometimes because we love the game and we love seeing the players and seeing the plays, but it's a business, right? At the end of the day, for a lot of these people, as you mentioned, like this jump, and we can trace this parallel to football or soccer, how you call it in the United States, where you have these guys who might not have opportunities in life, might not have like a lot of chances otherwise, and then they see like this amount of money. Of course, they're gonna go for it. Justin Jefferson loves the Vikings, but if I don't know, like the Colts tomorrow come up with 50 million per year, I'm pretty sure you say, fine, I love you, Minnesota, but I'm joining the Colts for whatever reason. I don't know why I put the Colts in this discussion, but anyways, but this whole thing of changing, and as you said, I wouldn't be sad if I was Mike Mayock, for example. I joined the Raiders and then they fire me and I'm still getting my 10 million every year without doing anything. I just need to sit and watch the games on Sunday. So yeah, I have my
Sounds
pay, I
like the
have my
dream.
money. Like yeah, exactly. Like people are going to forget 2, 3 years from now or 5 years from now that I was the head coach who did this, and that. Not necessarily, but yeah, it's hard because as fans, um, I can only imagine how does it look like to be kind of, why don't we have this? Why don't we have this? Why don't we have this? Like the Jaguars fan, even though they were almost like very close to the Super Bowl at one point, right, with Blake Bortles, but they never had this kind of sense of stability. And they look around, it's like, why can't we have this? Why can't we be similar to the Ravens, similar to the Steelers, not similar to the Chiefs, because the Chiefs has a combination of perfection everywhere. But it's like, why can't we have at least this structural stability? Which, for example, I think it's bringing now. Harbaugh has brought to the Chargers. I think the Chargers are also kind of in this path. You see the confidence in Justin Herbert now changing. You see how the team approaches the conversations, the interviews. So like these finer pieces of details that are being reflected now on the games.
I've kind of come to this point over the last year or so, and it's a silly conclusion to reach, but I've said it a couple times, and I'll say it again in a silly way here. Being a head coach in the NFL is very hard. It's an incredibly hard job, and there aren't 32 people who can capably do it because of how hard of a job it is. When you're the head coach of an NFL team, you have 53 players on your game day roster, plus another 20 or so on the practice squad. So let's call it 75 guys. You have a coaching staff that has, let's call it another 20. You have your equipment staff, people that you oversee. When you're a head coach in the NFL, depending on what sort of control you have within the organization, you do everything. You set the meetings, you set the schedule, you set all of it. So let's say comfortably as a head coach of an NFL team, you're the manager of 150 to 200 people. That's an incredibly difficult job no matter what it is. Now, let's throw in the complicating factor that 53 of your employees are millionaires who you have to convince to get punched in the face 50 times a day every single week. That's really, really hard. It's really, really difficult to juggle all of those dynamics, and not everybody can do it. And I think that we've seen that sometimes the people who can do it sneak up on us a little bit. That kneecap thing. People thought Dan Campbell was going to be a joke. Now he's one of the best head coaches in the NFL. It's a very secret sauce for what guys are able to tap into this and what guys aren't. And I think that that's why we have such a high failure rate in head coaches that are hired, because the process that we have to find these guys, we just pick the best coordinators and then we put them into that role. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And so I just think that the challenges on a head coach in the league and how difficult it is to be good at that job because of the strange demands that are placed on you. That's why it's not as easy as, hey, look at what they did. Why can't we just do that? There aren't enough people out there capable of doing the job at that level for you to replicate it that easily.
Yeah. I think, as you said, if it wasn't for the money difference in the salary, most coordinators wouldn't want to be head coaches.
No, I think ego is part of it. There are guys,
Yeah.
this is, and I don't even say that in a negative way. I think that in the NFL, in the business of the NFL, you can't lie to the players. They can see right through you if they think you're kind of a hollow shell. And so you have to walk into this with a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of ego, a certain amount of swagger. You have to balance that with humility, empathy, all the things that go along with being a good leader. But you can't be kind of a shrinking violet in this job. So if you're somebody who's going to be an NFL coach, I think that often aligns with a certain level of ambition that's going to push you toward wanting to be a head coach eventually.
Yeah, it's as you said, it's a tough job, like getting people to align with your vision and having 53 people with the same mindset, or at least as close as a mindset as possible, right? And the Lions is a perfect example of this because they have, I would say, a head coach that is very different from the norm. He feels like he's very energetic. Of course, he's very qualified for the job, but he's very energetic. And where did you see like the more brainiacs as being successful, like Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay? You have Mike Tomlin. They're very reserved, very quiet, very not quiet, but they're focused on that thing, right? They're not like as expensive and as like the flamboyant guy that I see like Dan Campbell.
I think that Mike is probably closer to Dan than you're making it out to be. But I
Seriously.
think that, yeah, oh yeah, Mike has a real presence about him. He's
Okay.
incredibly charismatic. He's incredibly magnetic and charming. Matt is somebody that I'm fascinated by Matt's success because I really enjoy Matt. I think he's very, very smart. I think he's a phenomenal football coach, but he's just a different sort of personality than some of those guys are. I think Matt is probably closer to, what Kyle Shanahan is, and just in terms of their general demeanor than a lot of these
Hmm.
other really successful coaches that we talk about. I'm probably painting with too broad of a brush here, but if we're looking at that McVay tree specifically, Kyle and Matt have always reminded me a little bit more of each other personality wise. And then Kevin O'Connell and McVay, I think, kind of have a similar sort of vibe to them where when you have a conversation with Kevin and when you have a conversation with Sean, I'll go back, and if I were to like transcribe a 20-minute discussion, it would be 18,000 words long. Like they would just say a million things over the course of that 15 minutes, and just they talk a mile a minute, but you're engaged and kind of intrigued the whole time. And so there's different ways to do it. There are very different ways to do it. I think that how you build your staff is incredibly important. The people you put around you is incredibly important. And again, that gets back to why this is a really difficult job that not that many people are capable of doing at a high level.
Yeah. You spoke about the Sean McVay thing. I remember you had an interview with him during the summer, I think, before the season. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's exactly like that, right? So you ask him a question and he will give like 25 different examples of a play or something that he's seen before, and that's why he's kind of reusing, putting this into motion, and that's why he likes Puka Nakua to do this, and that. It's like it's amazing, it's amazing. It's a lot to absorb, I would say. I had to listen to that interview twice to kind of understand this. And when you see what Jordan Rodriguez did, by the way, I think that's one of the best podcast miniseries that I've ever listened to. The what is the name? The play callers,
The play
right?
callers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good, so good, and it gives you kind of this view of who Matt LaFleur is, who Mike McDaniel is, who is Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, and it's fantastic. Which one would you think for you, Robert? Which from all of the guys that you have interacted with, who is the guy that you like the most? Personality wise, knowledge wise, I think everybody has like a fantastic knowledge, but who
Oh,
is the guy that
that's
kind
how
of picked you?
it's so hard to say. It's so hard to say. I think that it's incredibly hard to say. I think that, there's a reason. I'll say this. There's a reason that Sean was always somebody that people just from the moment they meet him are like, yeah, that guy's gonna be a head coach in the NFL. Even when he
Hmm.
was like 26, 27 years old. There are people you come across in your life that, and I've been lucky to meet a lot of these people in just the things that I've gotten to do professionally, where you meet somebody and there's no ambiguity about why they're successful, right? You completely understand it. by interacting with that person for 20 minutes why they have become the person that they are. You can do too much of that. My mentor in college, my journalism professor, he said so many things that have stuck with me, but something that I've always maintained as I've gone through this business is just because you talk to somebody for 15 minutes doesn't mean you know them, and you have to make sure that you maintain that level of like skepticism in some of these discussions. But every so often you'll have a conversation with somebody for 15, 20 minutes, and it's very clear why they are the person that they are. And I think that Sean very much fits into that bucket. And so I wouldn't say he's my favorite person or anything like that, but I think just in terms of walking away from a conversation where you're like, oh, I get it, I think that he's somebody where it's apparent to you very fast.
Nice. Yeah. I have a similar view, especially when he was doing the preseason game and he's just got the microphone and he started talking to the guys who were doing the broadcast and he started explaining the game, and it was against the Patriots, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was against the Cowboys. And then Trey Lance got in and he's like, oh, now Trey Lance is here. So he's going to do this, and that. So he's kind of calling the plays for the Rams, talking to the guys about the plays that the Cowboys were doing with Trey Lance. It was so cool. And he seems to be very transparent, like the way he is in an interview, the way he is most likely with the players, the way he is on the sideline. It's amazing. It's amazing to see for sure.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah. I spoke about Puka here, and just Puka is I think one of the guys that I have the most pride, because when I watched his tape last year, I was like, this is the guy. This guy's good. And I kept talking to my friends like over fantasy to draft him because he was going to be. I expected him to be good, not that good, not to have like this historical season. And I know, Robert, you're not a scout. You are very clear when you're discussing with Dane, who is the best in the business at doing this, and with Nate last year, you not necessarily hold strong opinions about scout prospects and stuff like that, right? And we change opinions, which is good. But do you have a process? Do you have a way that you look for when you're looking at next year prospects, rookies before they start? So how do you usually look into this?
I don't. I really don't. I come to it so late, and it's so far away from like my personal expertise and purview. When we're gonna do a show, it depends on what we're doing. So, for example, we'll do a show about quarterbacks every single draft. I will take the top 4-ish quarterbacks, whatever quarterbacks we feel like are projected to go in the first round, essentially, if you're looking at consensus rankings. And I will try to watch 3 to 4 games of that quarterback. And I'm really just doing it to get a sense of familiarity with what type of player are we talking about? What are some general strengths and weaknesses of this player? Just so I can try to arm myself with the right questions to ask someone like Dane, someone like Nate when we're doing those shows. I would never, ever pretend to be somebody that has enough information or enough expertise to project these guys properly as NFL players. I have guys I like. I'll watch a guy and I'll just be like, oh, I like what he brings to the table. Every draft, there's inevitably going to be a couple of guys like that. I remember watching Zay Flowers at Boston College, and I was just like, that guy has something to him. The way that he moves with the ball in his hands, is somebody that, if I were making a bet, that is the sort of bet that I would make. But those opinions and those stances on college prospects, they are very, very loosely held because I do not go into it with nearly enough information to give a proper evaluation of these people.
Yeah. With that being said, just a reminder, I was pissed, and you were very happy when the Bears took Odunze, because you and me were like, this is a good prospect. We like him. We like the way he plays. We like who he is. I also do not pretend that I have like all the technical information. I read a lot, of course, from different people to understand what the prospect is and to try to understand what is described there, and then I'll watch some games. But Odunze was like the guy, and I remember you pump it up like the Bears are going to take the Odunze one. And you even said, I'm not going to comment on this anymore because I don't want to jinx it. So every time people would say something about Odunze, they were like, no, I'm not talking about this. I don't care. I don't want to see it because I know this is not going to happen. And I was like, yes, please please don't, because he was my number one prospect for this year. But yeah, it's an interesting approach, right? So, but at least you look into their college games, right? So you take a look, at least you understand what type of players they are, right?
Yes, yeah, and when we do, again, it depends on the type of show we're doing. If we're doing a show
Mm-hmm.
solely about the receivers and we're picking the top 5 receivers, I'll go back and watch at least a few games of every single receiver just so I can make sure that, all right, I know what they are. I'll look at the analytics, etc. But I would never pretend to be any sort of draft expert or any sort of scout. I'm coming to this from an NFL perspective, and it's just based on the demands on your time. It's not a matter of I don't want to go back and watch, but by the time free agency ends or free agency winds down, it's March 25th. We got a month until the draft happens. So unless I wanted to spend most of my season watching draft tape, that's just not going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not up. My job is to cover the NFL all year. And, the people like Dane, I'm going to sit back in the spring and I'm going to tap into their knowledge because that's what they spend their entire year doing.
Yeah, it's part of remit, right?
Yeah, I think that you can't be an expert in everything.
Yes.
You just can't do that. And so I think that just kind of admitting at this point, like, I'm not going to be a draft expert. You want to be curious, you want to do the work, but understanding I'm never going to be able to catch up to the guys that are doing it the way that they're doing it. At that point, I almost love that part of the calendar because I can just be the host of the show. And I can just kind of sit back and ask people questions that I want to know the answer to. And when you have somebody like Dane, it's incredible. He's an unbelievable resource, and
Yes.
I just have so much respect for him because of the work he puts in, how serious he takes it. But he doesn't take himself very seriously. He just is the ultimate professional and somebody that one of my favorite parts of working at The Athletic is getting to work with Dane and getting to interact with him, especially during that time in the spring where we're doing at least one show a week, sometimes two.
Yeah, tell Dane that he is the go-to source for most of us Brazilians when it comes to the draft. Everybody's reading the beast. Everybody's kind of listening to what he has to say and how he evaluates talents. So yeah, please pass it on to him to say that the Brazilian audience thanks him for all the work that he does because it's simply amazing.
I certainly will.
Yeah. Okay, before we finalize here, I would like to do something that you do, as I said in the beginning of this show. You do quite well during your show when you're interviewing other people, and I want to do this with you and also with João. You have questions, 3 questions basically. The first one is, what is the thing that you know about the NFL? So you have been asking this question, Robert, but you've not necessarily ever answered it from your perspective only, right? So what is it that you know about the NFL right now?
I could go a lot of different directions with this. If you don't have a plan offensively where your infrastructure, your foundation, the way things are set up are consistently making it easier on your players. If you don't have a play call, either a play caller or an offensive architect that's making the game easier on your players consistently, you have no shot. It's just never going to happen for you. When you're watching a team like the Lions, when you're watching a team like the Ravens right now, when you're watching a team, like the Bills, if you don't have that, you're never going to be able to compete with the real teams in the NFL. And I think that we felt that this year. When you watch a team like the Bears with Shane Waldron and what they were doing, you compare that to what the Vikings had with Kevin O'Connell, what the Packers had with Matt LaFleur, what the Lions have with Ben Johnson. You're just fighting an uphill battle that's unwinnable. And so I think that this year, that's always been true. But I think that as you watch the teams and kind of separate them into 2 buckets, either you have one of those guys or you don't. You feel the difference in the 2 buckets when you're watching those types of teams.
What about you, João? What is the thing that you know about the NFL?
Yeah, first let me say I absolutely agree with Robert. I think having an offensive mind, an offensive architect, it's the best asset a team can have in modern NFL. That said, what I know right now is that I'm gonna go hot take.
Of
Drake
course,
May
we cannot
is
go
already
more than an hour without a hot take. Yes, please do it. Is
okay.
it Bo Nix
I
related?
know. No, no,
Okay,
no,
thank
please
you.
no.
Thank you. Because, yeah, it's been like 3 weeks that we have been talking only about Bo Nix. Bo Nix became 2024 Brock Purdy. So, yeah, please, no.
Yeah, and Robert, we also being victimized by the Broncos fans' weirdness about Bo Nix.
Yeah, we're suffering, man. We're suffering.
Yeah, let's stop right here.
Yes, we love you,
But
Bo Nix people. So, yes, please, John, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, we love you. But what I was going to say is that Drake May is already a top 5 NFL quarterback.
Top
I have the same
five.
face. Yes, I
Top
have the
5.
same face. Yes, he's been saying this for a month now. But yes, yes, yeah, it's the hot take of the season. But Drake May is amazing on his own. Come on, he is fantastic. Yes, top five.
Listen,
I can't. I can't.
I'm very excited to see where Drake May goes from here, but I think that right now I'd still probably rather have 5 quarterbacks than Drake May. I guess that's what I would say.
Yes, I completely agree. Everybody agrees with you, but João. João is a Drake May ultimate fan. He's like the guy. He used to support the Saints, and then the Patriots drafted May, and now he's a Patriots supporter. So, yeah, that's how Drake May has influenced his life. So,
No, I was
I
teamless.
I love a man of principle. I love somebody who's going to stick by his guns like that. As somebody who has no principles and has no courage, that's something I struggle with. So when somebody else is able to kind of stand by their opinions like that, I have a lot of respect for that.
yeah. Good one, João. Good one, João. So, and
Yeah, but
Robert,
let me
yes,
just
go,
say
João.
that I have this courage because I had the same take about Patrick Mahomes before he even started a game in
That
the
is true.
NFL.
That is true. That is true.
I think Drake May is going to be really good. I think who knows, when you 5, 6, 7 games, it's always hard to tell, but I think that some of the aspects of his game and just the way that he's been able to really function within that offense despite the lack of talent that they have around him, I think that's a very good indicator and signal of a quarterback's ability to succeed when you start to improve the things around him.
Maybe going to look like not very good, and João, you're going to be clapped 2, 3 years from now. But for now, yeah, I will not put he as a top 5. And Robert, what is the one thing that you think you know about the NFL?
I think that we're going to have a return in this coaching cycle back to the leader of men culture setter types. I think that that's going to be true for a bunch of different reasons. I think that we're out of offensive coaches. That the tree has been picked over so much that all the guys who are offensive coaching candidates are, for the most part, they're very young, they're still relatively unproven, or they're in their first year as play callers back in the NFL. Cliff Kingsbury, Liam Cohen, people like that. I think that we're going to, because of the success of guys like Dan Campbell, because of the success of guys like Mike Tomlin, Jim Harbaugh, I would not be at all surprised if, there are teams who are going to look at a guy like Mike Vrabel a little bit differently than they would have 2 off seasons ago, or even this off season, when I think more people were still chasing like the hot young offensive coach.
Do you think Belichick is coming back for an encore or not in the NFL?
I think that somebody will hire him this offseason.
You think so?
I do.
Okay. Jean, what about you? What is the one thing that you think you know about the NFL?
Yeah, I think that we're about to see the value of the running back position rise again.
Yes, please.
Even though
I need this.
Robert said, yeah, but even though Robert said that they are the last thing you should put in there, I think you're gonna see more running backs getting drafted earlier, and I think we're gonna see the value of running back free agents rise a good amount next year.
Yeah. And the last thing, Robert, is what do you think you knew about the NFL, but it has been proved wrong, or it's not necessarily proving what you said before or you expected before? I have a take on this, which is the as we discussed, João. Yeah, go for it, Robert.
I think my answer is probably, and I don't even know if I feel this way. It's just something I was kicking around in my head yesterday. The value of offensive lines versus pass catchers. and which one you would want to prioritize as we get back to a world where running the ball is really, really, really vital to a good offense's success, which is more important. And I think
Hmm.
that, I've always been of this stance, and I think I still am, that one individual pass catcher is more valuable than one individual offensive lineman. And it's more about making sure that you can build a complete offensive line with 5 workable pieces. But at the same time, when you watch a team that's heavily invested in their offensive line, like you watch the Eagles play, it's like, all right, like, or you watch the Lions play and you see the value that those sorts of groups give those teams. I think it's hard to understate how important that is. So
Yes.
I'm willing to kind of reinterrogate my own views on how you want to build a team and where your priorities should lie.
Yeah, we did a show last week with another friend of ours, and we basically drafted the best players in the NFL right now, right? So it's similar to I think what you did earlier this year at the Athletic, and basically we had I think 9 or 10 offensive linemen being drafted from us. So I think that kind of tells you like yeah the importance of the position, right? Penei Sewell, uh, we had Joe Alt, we had like Rashawn Slater, so everybody like the top guys, we've been drafting them, and Justin Jefferson was like the last pick that we had from an offensive perspective because we drafted like the offensive line and we feel that the offensive line is super important for the success. That is how Bo Nix has been playing so well this year. I'm not gonna go to the Bo Nix again, please. I'm not. But like the offensive line that the Broncos have right now is just simply amazing. It's allowing him to progress and grow, and this is super good for him.
Yeah, it's hugely important. Their pass protection has been excellent this year, and I think that is so important in allowing a quarterback to feel comfortable and confident. And I think that you've seen his comfort and confidence really grow over the course of the season.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, João? What is the thing that you thought you knew, but you don't necessarily know about the NFL?
Yeah, with all my quarterback analysis, I used to think that having an elite quarterback was fundamental to win a Super Bowl nowadays. And now I'm not sure about it anymore. We've seen a lot of limited quarterbacks having great success behind great offensive minds. So I'm not so. I mean, it never was a necessity to win the Super Bowl, but it was a big advantage.
Hmm.
Now I'm not so sure how big of an advantage having an elite quarterback is.
Nice, nice. Okay, guys, I think that's it for today. Robert, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Thank you a lot for participating to this show and everything that you share, all of the information and the thinking and the processes. This is amazing. I hope our Brazilian audience and whomever is listening to us, hopefully this goes worldwide. But yeah, it was amazing. We loved it. Please tell everyone where you are, what you're doing, and what where people can find you. Again, thanks from the bottom of our hearts. It's been amazing for us.
Thank you for having me. It's very simple. We do the Athletic Football Show 3 times a week, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Are you on Blue Sky? Are you on
I
Twitter?
am. Yep, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Twitter still. So against my better judgment, I am still on all of the social media networks. So you can find me at Robert Mays on all of those.
All right, perfect. João, where can we find you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm at Twitter and Blue Sky at João Mauricio FA.
All right, good. I am Gabriel Mafra, or Mafra, as people would call me. I'm Gabs Mafra on both Twitter and Blue Sky. It's interesting. We never call it X. We're still calling it Twitter, and nobody's changing this. But yes, Gabs Mafra everywhere. This is Silent Talks. It was great having you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Have a good one.